Well, hey everyone. So this week we're laying down a little bonus track, a text that was not originally in our plan, but we actually studied the end of chapter 5 as a staff team this week, and it's just too good to pass up. So we are looking at this famous story, a dual story of Jairus and his daughter with this bleeding woman. And so notice the comparisons and contrasts all over the text this week. You have Jairus, who's a rich synagogue ruler who draws a crowd of people, next to this woman who's been bleeding for 12 years and has spent all that she has, is isolated because of her condition of bleeding. She would have been unclean, which means she can't have human contact during this whole period of her illness. And she's spent all she's had. She's tried everything, next to this man who is right in the center of power and authority. And the contrast there are remarkable. Some of the biggest themes that I think come out of today's text is the question of faith. What is faith? What's the nature of faith? Ask yourself that as you dive in to the text this week. Both the woman and Jairus are displaying faith and called to have faith and belief in different ways. And so what does it look like for us to trust in Jesus? And what is he teaching us this week about faith? Some background information, this idea of uncleanliness. One, being unclean in the ancient world did not immediately mean sinful. Sometimes we hear the word unclean and we think sinful. This woman did nothing wrong. In her condition, though, she would have been considered ritually impure. Usually for multiple reasons, for burying a loved one, for different illnesses. In terms with this woman, in a normal cycle of menstruation, you would have been ritually impure for a moment, which means you just take some time away from society until you're ready to enter back in to regular society, to the worship of God. But this woman, because of her condition, she's constantly in a state of bleeding. She would have been continually impure, which would have brought her to a place of extreme isolation. No one could touch her. Anything that she touched became unclean. It would have been a really hard situation for her. On top of that, we have this really great personal moment where Jesus calls her out of the crowd and he calls her daughter. She's the only one in the whole gospel where Jesus calls daughter. Earlier in chapter 2, Mark called the man who was paralyzed son, your sins are forgiven. So that man and this woman are the only two moments where Jesus calls someone son and daughter. So that seems significant. We've been talking about Jesus as king, as a king bringing a kingdom. Maybe you could ask yourself the question, what does it look like? What does it mean for Jesus to be king calling her daughter? What does it mean that the king is calling her daughter? And what is significant about how he's interacting with her, how he interacts with Jairus, what he does with that with his girl at the end of the story. Who is Jesus? What is faith? What is the nature of faith? What are the contrasts and comparisons going on between these two great pictures of faith here? So looking forward to jumping in this week with you all. Have a great day.